Hey traders, this is Christian Fromhertz, Tribeca Trade Group with your weekend video. And thanks for tuning in Sunday. It's cold and sleeting out today, so a nice day to kind of do a nice review of the indices and some of the biggest themes of last week, which I'm going to be going through here. So I always kind of like to start the weekend video with my market view, and then I'll kind of go through several layers and levels of different things that I'm looking at in the market and why that my thesis is just that. So the main theme for me this week is just kind of stay the course. We're getting through, or we've gone through the heart of the earnings season. This is great. We've seen a little bit of choppy markets and then a little bit of rally towards the end of last week. That's everything that I've been kind of talking about, which was expecting a lot of chop around earnings season, as some names have really run into have run into their earnings report very nicely. A lot of the FANG stocks did that, and then they consolidated. Then it's always interesting to see once a name reports whether or not buyers are going to show up. And if you're like me and the subscribers in the Tribeca Trade Room, you're looking at flow. We're looking at flow every day, and we're looking to see where call buyers and aggressive call buyers come in after a name reports earnings. It gets very noisy pre-earnings, but it really is a lot more important to me when big institutional buyers are looking at names after they've reported and they've had a couple days, maybe like the 2 or 3 day rule after earnings, and then they start coming and buying. So we've certainly seen that in a lot of, speaking of those FANG names, we saw that in Apple pre and post earnings. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, we saw a lot of Facebook calls just go up left and right. We've seen a lot of Netflix, just repeat Netflix call buying going on. We saw some Google call buying towards the end of the week. Really haven't seen that much in Amazon, but mainly those three of the FANG stocks: your Netflix, your Facebook, your Google, and then Apple. We've seen a lot of buying in those names and some other names too, which I'm going to get through towards the end of the video. But let's start with the first couple observations, or let's go through the index review, which I always like to do just to see where these are at. You don't necessarily have to trade the indices, as I think there's just been a lot of chop in the SPX or the SPY. But you could see towards the end of last week. We've seen this now a couple days. Well, it was Thursday and Friday of last week, but we've seen this now with a couple Fridays where Fridays have had some nice price action. But just going into this chart, we're above value. We broke out above value a couple weeks ago, and we've been chopping around. I said in last week's video it was kind of like a bend but don't break here, as it looked like a couple days it looked a little bit iffy. But the week turned out fine. We saw this in the beginning of last week as well, a little bit of chop, and we're continuing to go higher here. And we've almost tested this uptrend line in SPYs, but it is what it is, and it looks great. Nasdaq has been a completely different situation where there's been very little chop in the Qs or Nasdaq, and it's continued higher. In a couple hours that I have, I don't really like to talk about, like, you'll very rarely see me go back and say, hey, look at what happened here a couple months ago, and this is where you should have gotten long. But I'll do it here in this NASDAQ chart because I have talked about this. The breaking of the value areas is really a place where you want to be long. What I will say now is that the NASDAQ, just like it was back here, got a little bit over, is a little bit extended and a little bit overbought. So I actually sold call spreads back here and made some nice profits, just going out a week, not going out too far, just looking for a little bit of a move back. So being that the RSI is back to 75 or 76 in the Qs, which I really pay attention to in the major indices, I think single names, they can get overbought, they could stay overbought for a while, but usually when the major indices do it, they don't usually stay above the 70s or touching 80 RSI for a long time. So I actually sold a little bit of NDX call spreads, out of the money call spreads for next week's expiration. I know that's kind of running, getting in front of a moving train at this point, considering this chart and what a nice move it has been. But it worked out really well for me a couple weeks ago, so I'm sticking to my same guidelines here. And while I've got long positions on, I want to be selling a little bit of premium where I can when things get a little bit overbought. So that's the only one that looks really overbought to me, is the Qs. We jumped down to IWM, and I've been looking at small caps literally every day and looking for clues in the overall market in in what small caps show, and they just broke out of this consolidation period since they've been in since late, really since late. November. So it's been like this for now a couple months. And if anybody kind of, in their newsletter or in their video tells you that this market has been easy, you just look at the small caps and see that they've really gone nowhere for about this December, January, and half of February. That's 2.5 months of going sideways. So, especially if you're an option trader, something like this just kind of proves to you that IWMs and small caps look like they were going to break down a couple times here, and now have finally. I've been waiting for an MACD crossover, and it looks like it just materialized here in IWM. So, of the three indices, I think IWM for a move higher looks most interesting to me, and I'd actually like to set up and play IWM to the long point, to the long side at this point. So that is what I like in the major indices. Maybe fading a little bit of the Q strength right now and going long IWM. In terms of sectors, this is a good sign. It just shows very good market breadth as we see more and more sectors start to move from, and when I have this green color, that means that the trend is up, and they're above the 50, the 100, and the 200-day moving average. And we got two more groups that we got one group that fell, got knocked down, which is telecom, which is a defensive sector, and utilities and consumer staples, which are also defensives, but they for a long time, for a good couple of months, they were in this yellow category, or even the red category, which you don't see any more of, where they were underneath the 50, the 100, and the 200-day moving average. They're now back below all three. Utilities just barely, but nevertheless they're above. And what I was saying as well in the trading room on Friday, which I think is a good sign, is we're not seeing the same groups lead every day. In the beginning of last week, when the major indices weren't really moving too much, you had some of the FANG stocks and momentum names really gain in the beginning of the week, and then at the end of the week, I really thought that the rest of the market kind of caught up to some of those momentum plays. So you always have to keep your eyes on everything. I know some people really like to concentrate on the Facebook, the Google, the Amazon, and the Netflix, but it's not going to be every day where those are really trending. We saw it in the beginning of last week, but they really kind of didn't move too much Thursday and Friday, and there was other opportunities. So you really have to move and keep concentrate on other things if you're a day trader besides those four FANG stocks. They're going to have days where they trend, and you're going to be able to make money on them, but you don't want to just kind of sit on your hands when those names are not doing much. You want to be able to capitalize on other moves in the market, which we saw a lot of groups outperform. We saw biotech, we saw retail, we saw the home builders on Friday really move up. There's a couple other groups. I think energy also outperformed on Friday as well. But you want to be in position to capitalize on not just the moves in the momentum names, but some of the other names, because you will see that rotate from time to time. But bottom line is, I think everything looks pretty good here. Just the market breadth is really strong, and to me, it's better in that situation when you have a lot of groups performing really well than just maybe one or two groups that are pulling the cart. So very strong looking here. I'm just going to talk about ETF inflows and outflows for the week. There's some pretty interesting moves this week. This analysis always gives me an idea is where money is being allocated, and allocated quickly into the market. So sometimes you could really pick up on these trends pretty quickly. So what we've seen for the last 2 weeks, which it's not all about equities. Gold has really made a nice move up here, and there's been a lot of money that's been pouring into gold the last 2 weeks. GLD actually saw the biggest inflow of any ETF last week, with $882 million of investment going into the GLD ETF. And then you look at what's going on with the miners and GDXJ, which I'm going to get to, which is one of my stocks of the week, or one of my areas of the week. Making a nice move above the 200-day moving average. And I actually got long GDXJ in cash last week. And you can see this versus investment. The blue line is investment going into the GDXJ. So it kind of took a pause here since, pre-election and post-election, but you could see that money being added back into the gold mining ETF, junior gold miners, that is. So that was the biggest area of, or one of the biggest areas of inflows in the market last week. Also, industrials, which is XLI. XLI is a sector that I profiled about, I think it was either 2 or 3 weeks ago, saying it was the next sector to take a leg up, and it certainly has. Industrials are looking pretty strong right now. So if you go to the XLI ETF, and I caught this, I was talking about the break of the value area. So certainly industrials look pretty strong here. You can see a nice buy signal, and they may be actually trying to push and take this level out here. So pretty strong. Also, which I'm going to get to, ITA, which is defense, is also seeing more inflows. Really interesting chart. I'm going to bring this up in 2 seconds, but I want to talk about healthcare as well. $606 million of inflows, and that's the second week of strong inflows into that group. So let me actually go down to the chart section. I profiled XBI, which is the biotech ETF, in last week's newsletter, and you can see that this is doing its thing here. Whoops, that's not what I want. So above this downward trend line here, so a nice move out and some continuation. So this was, I caught this right in, right on this first move outside of value in last week's newsletter. This looks strong, way above the 200-day moving average now. So I wanted to talk about XLV, which is just straight healthcare, and you could see also a move above the 200-day moving average. And along here, you've got a nice easy stop price. Notice that the 200-day moving average coincides with the top of value. So right around the 71 handle would be your stop for a long, if you're long XLV, or if you're looking to get long the healthcare, which again is seeing, if you go back to my newsletter, you can see the investment really pick up. This was the investment right after the election, and this is the investment last week. So some money is really being allocated into healthcare, which again is, we haven't seen too much of this in the last year and a half, besides the election and now just last week. So this was the second biggest inflow for U.S. sectors. The first again was industrials. The second healthcare last week. Just to kind of, before I get ahead and talk about ITA, which I think is really interesting, which is the aerospace and defense ETF, I just want to round this out. Other sectors that saw inflows last week were financials. They also saw strong $603 million inflows, so no let up there in financials. And then other sectors that saw inflows besides financials, materials, a lot of that was the gold miners, but also XLB, as in boy, the material ETF. This is a group that's also been seeing nice inflows the last couple weeks. Utilities, technology, and consumer discretionary also saw inflows. The only sector that saw outflows, which was consumer staples, and most of those were in the beginning of the week. They actually saw a little bit of inflows towards the end of last week, but I think like once we're looking at around like Tuesday or Wednesday, it was about $800 million of outflows, but that kind of trickled off as we got to the end of the week, and there was actually a little bit of money that was put back there. But the main thing to focus on: industrials, healthcare, and financials. Real strong inflows last week. In terms of international ETFs, not too much for country specific, although Brazil did see a nice inflow last week and is looking really strong. Emerging markets, $1.4 billion. So since they had that big sell-off right after the election, there's been money that's being put to work in. Look at these two charts. It's mainly been IEMG. This is core emerging markets. It's very similar to EEM or VWO, but you could see this move. What a nice buying on the dip. Right above the 200-day moving average. I confess I did not go into emerging markets. I was more concentrated on some other areas of the market, but emerging markets have been making a really nice move since they bottomed out in the beginning of December. So if you kind of take a look at area by area, Brazil seems to be exhibiting really nice strength. EWZ. You could also look at ILF. This is all Latin America, so you also have Peru, Chile in here, Mexico as well in here, but very, very strong looking chart. So besides that, besides emerging markets, we continue to see a lot of money being allocated into developed markets internationally as well. So VEA, IEFA, EFA itself, all of these ETFs, they kind of have that fancy name, which is EFA. Basically, all that means is Japan, Europe. Those are the majority of the developed markets. But you go back and you look at a 10-year chart, or a multi-year chart, and from where these areas topped out a couple years ago, I think there's a lot more upside in developed international markets. So $41 is an area where we're now above this area in VEA. And right now we're at 38.26, and we've really have no major resistance, maybe a little bit over here, but you've got these areas which I would be targeting. If you are long either, it's kind of the same looking chart if you look at VEA or EFA, just a different looking, uh, uh, just a different ETF, but almost the same exact basket of stocks that they track. So again, this one's also punching out here. I think there's a lot of upside or open road that international developed markets have. So I've been talking about this one quite a bit. So next, I want to get into. So that is the flow section for the week. So a couple interesting trends there. I talked about gold miners already. We talked about healthcare and the investment that it saw last week, the inflows that saw last week. So this is also really interesting. The amount of money that's been poured into this ETF ITA since the election has, I'm missing a dollar sign here, but $1.1 billion has gone into this little ETF that was a pretty small looking ETF. You could see the top weights of this. It's Boeing, it's a UTX, LMT, RTN, NOC, ARNC, which we've just seen repetitive, nonstop call buying in that particular name. Also TXT. But, so the blue line here, what I'm showing with the blue line is the investment in the ETF. And you could see how this thing has just gone, um, you know, just straight up basically, and $1.1 billion going into this ETF. It's just crazy, the amount of investment. And besides the first couple of weeks after the election, it kind of tapered off a little bit, but you could see this thing really leg back up here. And then also, look at what I'm circling here. This ETF really saw no action in the last year and a half, but look at the volume that this thing has been taking in, and all this is buying. It's evidenced, by the investment and what I'm tracking in terms of inflows. All this buying excuse me, all this volume is buying. So really, I think really interesting. Another chart that I think is really interesting right now is the materials. I've talked about the materials again the last couple weeks. They had this nice breakout side of value here. They've been kind of sitting back here, and the 5 period exponential has crunched down with the 20, which is a great indication, and you see a nice looking green bar right on the top of value, so breaking out. So I was looking at a couple names in this group like CF Industries. They report next week, so if you don't want that single stock exposure in CF, which I think is also showing the same type of pattern, but you could see, was at one point a $70 stock. Now only, it's half that. It's made a tremendous move from the lows, from about at $22. But I think this has more upside to go. And you could see in this uptrend, the last couple times that the price has gone back and touched the 20 period exponential moving average has been a great buying opportunity. So we got one here, we got one here, and we just got one here again. So CF does report earnings this week. If you don't want the single stock exposure, what I'm looking at is the XLB ETF until at least the name reports earnings. Or I may actually be setting up an earnings trade just for CF for next week. Next, that I have in the newsletter. That's my ETF section of the newsletter. Names that we've seen aggressive call buying in, and I've got 12 names in here for this week. I'm not going to go into the details of this because you have to be a member of Tribeca Trade Group, so I'm not going to talk about what contracts. But this section of the newsletter that I have is all names that have been seeing aggressive repeat option call activity, and they're going out at least 1.5 months. So not your weekly stuff or your momentum trades that people are day trading. I'm looking for names that I'm looking for option activity that is going out at least 1.5 months, many times all the way out to January. IBM, this is a name that we've seen repeat call buying pretty much nonstop. We saw another call buyer at the end of last week. Netflix, we saw a lot of January calls post earnings, so a lot of option activity after the name is reported earnings, which is always, in my opinion, a good sign. AMD, this has just been repeat call buying, even again after earnings. This name looks a little bit extended to me. I think any dip, I will be buying AMD. Apple, I don't usually have in this section a lot of the FANG stocks, but it is what it is, and they've been seeing a lot of call buying post earnings. Apple pre earnings as well. Same thing with Micron call buying. Same thing with Facebook. I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. This was on the 8th. We saw all type of call buying, September, March, and I think a little bit further out than what I've got in this report. But very aggressive after earnings. And again, just like I said in the beginning of the video, a few days after, like 2 or 3 days after the name reported, and the name was kind of, not doing too much after earnings, then all of a sudden we started to see buyers step back into the name. So ABX, this is a gold miner. This is a name that I'm still long. I've had some really nice profits and already have taken some money off the table in ABX, but if you like this name, you got defined support of the 200-day moving average. So I'm still long this name. I still like it. And in the beginning of last week, we saw a lot of further out call buying going out to January. ARNC, we've seen call buying just about every day the last 2 weeks. This name is almost hockey stick, making a hockey stick move up here. But Elliott is involved in this name. We're also seeing a little bit of call buying in Alcoa as well, AA. VIAV, this is also reported earnings. We saw a lot of call buying pre-earnings, and and same thing, kind of a similar theme in a lot of these names. That once the name has reported, call buyers have come back into the name. This name is part of a spin-off from JDS Uniphase. And you look at these names and what this company does. Anything that let's see if I can bring the description up here. Just get Bloomberg. Bloomberg, for whatever reason, is hesitating this morning. But it seems like anything. I'm not an expert in these names, but anything that has these optical, that is doing something with optical products in technology, seems to be super super hot right now. You look at the peers of this group: Sienna, ADTN, Finisar. This group has been doing very very well. I think Oclaro is in this group as well. OCLR, really a hot area of the market, and you could see just the pattern of this name, and it's gotten almost hockey stickish as well, going up and to the right here. And I think any move back here to the 50-day moving average is an area to get long this name. Teradyne, I think this was on Wednesday that we saw call buying in this name. This is a name that does a lot of testing in the semi space. Dollar Tree. So a lot of the charts that I have up here, this one's a little bit different, or similar pattern, just call buying on the strength. This one's a little bit different. This one's below the 200-day moving average and below the 100 as well. But we saw a chunky call buyer in this one. I think that was also around Wednesday. This was a May 82.5 call buyer in Dollar Tree. CarMax is another name. This should be highlighted here. So same day we saw call buying in that group. That's a little bit of a different chart as well. Price action is above the 50, 100, and 200-day moving average. A couple other names. This was on Friday. We saw an in-the-money call buyer in eBay. eBay breaking out to a 52-week high. And then I included one banking name, Citigroup. This is one bank that we've seen buyers, but not every day call buying in, but just about once a week we've seen a nice call buyer in Citigroup. And if you take a look at City, you're not catching this thing on the highs right now. It's been consolidating and it's well off the $61 high. It's about $4 down. So I like this name. Also added to this list, I would say JP Morgan. We've been seeing call buying in that name as well. That name looks like it's trying to take that next leg higher. I would watch for in JP Morgan a break above 87.30, which looks like it tried to go on Friday, did not close above value. But any close above value, I would say, is a buying opportunity in JP Morgan. And I think that is it. Like I said, I had 12 names. I actually threw in another name there that saw aggressive call buying last week. So that's the video for the weekend. Thank you very much for watching. Please get involved at tribecatradegroup.com. We analyze this and flow all day long, and we catch these moves as they're happening live in our live trading room and our live chat room. So tribecatradegroup.com, you can get half off the first month. Give us a try. I think you're really going to like it. Our retention rate in terms of members, once members kind of come in, they stay, because our analysis, I really believe, is second to none. So again, tribecatradegroup.com. Thank you very much for watching the video, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thanks.